Reading 12 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teachings of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 1. Commentary, Birdlip, July 19th, 1941. Some thoughts on the war from the standpoint of the work. Part 1. War is an event which drags millions of people into its vortex, whether they wish it or not. People, however, imagine that they are free. All man's life is based on the idea that he is free to choose. If a man could clearly see that he is mechanical, that is, that he is not free, he could not endure the realization. It is necessary to understand that mankind on the earth is under 48 laws, and each person is actually under 96 orders of laws. This is at first sight difficult to see unless you remember the ray of creation and realize from it that the part is under more laws than the whole. The fact, however, that man on earth is under many laws can be understood in general. These laws, or influences, some waxing and some waning, as it were, or intercrossing and forming different combinations, produce the events that form the drama of human existence on the surface of the earth. Before an event occurs, it is quite easy to think that one is free from it. But when the event comes, the case is different. It is almost as if it tried to drag as many as possible into its range and feed on them. People forget what they thought. The event attracts them into its sphere of influence. By means of buffers and self-justifying, they enter the event and pass under its power. A man may decide he will never fight again in any war. He is sure he will not. But when the drums begin to beat, when the horrors and madness of war start, and he sees them or reads about them, he forgets all his resolutions. And it is the same, not only with events on the scale of war, but events on the scale of his ordinary daily life. For events are on many different scales. There are, for instance, collective events, that is, events implicating nations, or a single nation, such as wars or revolutions. And at the other end of the scale, there are the little cycles of events that form an ordinary man's private life, which turn like small wheels, repeating themselves endlessly. That is, in the same way, more or less, unless the man begins to struggle with himself and change himself. And although no one is really satisfied with his life, he does not see that his own level of being attracts his particular kind of life. That is, this repeating cycle of small events. Collective events, namely events which involve millions of people, are like big wheels. But a person's life is like a small wheel turning somewhere in a vast machinery of bigger and smaller wheels. And all these wheels, big and little, form life, which drives everyone. This work speaks often of the necessity of isolating ourselves from collective events. We are connected with them by attitudes as by invisible threads. To isolate oneself from collective events, it is necessary to change attitudes in oneself. It is through beginning to have a right attitude to the work that mechanically formed attitudes can be seen and altered, or even alter themselves. One can only observe a thing in oneself by means of something else. A thing cannot observe itself. To observe, one must stand away from what one observes. The whole system of work and all its ideas, which belong to the age-old teaching about man and his possible development and inner freedom, give the full possibility of self-observation. That is, one observes oneself from the teaching and the ideas and knowledge of the work. A man in life cannot do this, for he has been formed by life, and so can only observe himself from the ideas belonging to life. war in this system is said to be caused by extraterrestrial influences, not by people. It is said simply that planetary influences create war on Earth. But it adds that these influences create war on sleeping humanity. Because man is so deeply asleep, these influences act on him in a particular way. If he were awake, they would act on him in another way. The greatest mistake and the greatest injustice we do in regard to one another is to imagine that everyone is conscious. This work also says that in life everything happens. It seems that man does and can do, but this is not the case, but an appearance. Actually, everything happens just as the last war happened, and this present war has happened. But the work also says that everything happens on earth because man is asleep. Everything happens in a world of sleeping people. Everything that takes place in the only way it can. Millions kill each other, suffer incredible misery, and so on, because they cannot help it. And it all leads nowhere, and can lead nowhere. The direction that can lead somewhere is awakening from sleep. In every small part of time, some people are ready to awaken. If they do not try to do so, they block the way for others. It is like a ladder on each rung of which people are standing. If those above do not move up, those below cannot move. Awakening is the individual task of everyone, but only a few can awaken at a time or find the possibilities offered them. If these begin to awaken, the effect spreads and others begin to understand what work means and what awakening means. The hypnotism of life is at all times very powerful. The object of nature is to keep man asleep and keep him based on violence so that he serves the purposes of nature. The work is a force coming into life from conscious sources from outside life. Today, the hypnotism of war is very strong. It is necessary to resist it. In order to resist it, the influences reaching us through the work must be kept alive. In order to keep the influences of this work alive, it is necessary constantly to think about it, to concentrate on different sides of it, to renew it daily and put it into practice. The work must be kept alive, and everything that keeps it alive is useful, and everything that has the contrary effect is bad. Every one of you must think what it means to keep the work alive at this time, and what effort it requires on the part of those who are teaching this system. Only those who think seriously of the work and see all its difficulties and have realized for themselves how very easy it is to forget everything and fall back into ordinary life can understand what is meant. One thing can be added. You all know that everyone must play his part in life in this way. That is the fourth way that we are studying. But it is one thing to identify with what one must do in life, and another thing to take life as a means of working on oneself. Life and the work must not be mixed up. If a man mixes the work with life and cannot see the difference, he cannot feel the action of the work on him. It will fade and become as nothing in his mind. As you know, this point has been emphasized in many of the readings given since this present war began. The reason is obvious, but although this is so, we easily forget it and so must struggle all over again to remember the work and reset it in our minds. See its inner meaning once more and understand again what this work is and what life is, and why this work has always, in one form or another, been taught to suffering humanity in every age. Above all, you must not adapt to war any more than you must adapt to this system. To adapt to war is to go to sleep in regard to war.